Right. So a quick question here for the general. The caliber of intelligence people Kenya had in the past is gone. That is why we have the rubbish that we have at the moment. What went wrong? Where? How can this be remedied? Can we have the old guards, such as yourself, because apparently you were involved in questioning people during the 1982 coup. Can we have people like yourself come back into the intelligence and train the people we have now?
In contrast, I was not involved in questioning. I was actually one of the Kenya Air Force officers who had to be screened to get back to work. But
because of the coup?
The security forces and intelligence for that matter has been dynamic. And I don't think that they need the odd guards like us. They're, they're very well trained. During our period and the time we were in the at the time I was in the military, we trained very, very many people, not just locally, but abroad and in Israel, in UK, in US, and many, many places up to even Egypt, South Africa. We cooperate in a lot of areas, and we have very, very highly professional individuals who are called upon in other areas to assist in terms of, when you talk about the peacekeeping and peace enforcement, our officers always take a lead in devising other officers because we've got very highly trained individuals in the intelligence and the security as a whole.
If I could echo this point, I see no reason why Kenyans should see their democratic liberties curtailed or compromised in any way. These threats will continue. This is not the last attack of this sort. The only defense is good intelligence. Now, one step that Kenyan authorities might take immediately is to recognize it as part more fully of a global community and share more intelligence with Europe, Britain, the United States, other entities who have fairly sophisticated monitoring and intelligence gathering activities throughout the region, and do more accurate threat assessments and responding to perceived threats.
A viewer is taking issue with us, but first, thanks to the Recce squad, who are, in my view, capable of dealing with the terrorists, but their efforts were frustrated by KDF. This speaks to the, simultaneous response, you were saying, General Manzia, to the attack. And then kindly absolve KDF from the looting. The real looters are the people who looted the airport when it was burning, who loot us on the highways at roadblocks, etc., which speaks to the culture of looting in the country. But it's unbelievable how the media accuses our security systems. We saw pictures of these guys risking their own lives to save our children and our people. The media is trying to instill a negative attitude into Kenyan minds. We should come together and support our security agencies. David, you want to respond to that? Because there seems to be a strand in this country that sees difficult or tough questioning as being unpatriotic.
Yes, that's the whole point. I mean, we have a duty. We're duty bound to ask these questions. Because, okay, the deployment of the forces was appropriate. They did a job, but that job must be subject to appraisal. The success, the failure of it must be appraised because it's a duty they're performing. And I don't think we are undermining as such the effort or not appreciating the rescue efforts of our security forces. It is that there are questions which are not answered, and the defense forces are not being answerable, accountable for their actions, which fall short of our expectations.
And I think media has already accepted that a good job was done. But even as media, we are trying to assess ourselves. How do you fare in this? I think if Kenyans can remember when the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya, that's Dr. Harun Mwangi, and the director of communication, they went to Westgate. They said that they are going to come together and evaluate the work of the media in relation to Westgate. And I think that is, we are not saying that we in the media are angels. We also made our own mistakes. But this is a time for Kenyans to evaluate themselves and say, how do you fare in this? Or what could have been done better?
And that process is certainly taking place across some various media groups. And then speaking to the aspect of competence, Jerry, President Obama appointed a Republican as defense secretary due to competence. President Kenyatta has no option than to re-look at his cabinet beyond spoil. So clearly high expectations of the president out of Westgate. Do you think, given the nature of our politics in Kenya, that he will be able to, he will have the free hand to do that? Because clearly he was constrained the first time around.
You see, the president has to take charge. There is evidence that all cartels and people who have vested interest in the continuity of the status quo or privilege want to retain their hand in the till.
Positions.
The president must look at people who are competent and say, I'm going to deploy because it's his job that is on the line. Not the people he appoints. Ultimately, they are his representatives. I think that the appointment of Lenku as Interior Secretary has had questions because of his background, and people wonder whether you needed a military person or a security person. But again, there are certain protocols in appointing people to those positions. General Manzia here will tell you that you will not get a Minister of Defense who is a former general, because there will be always issues of peerage and whatnot. So you want somebody from another sector, but skilled and knowledgeable enough to come and lead a sector, but you don't want to get a greenhorn. Now that is where the issues are emerging.
And I think also woodwork.
Oh, what do you think?
I think from what I know is that the military is subordinate to civil authority, and they would not want to have a general as the minister. Yeah. They want to have a civilian so that the military becomes accountable to democratic practices of the modern times.
But what do you
and
also
I believe the Honorable Secretary for Internal Affairs, I believe he handled the situation in excellent manner, in the sense that he had all these other people who were briefing him, and he had to give a lot of information. He gave information at the right times, I would say, but to a certain extent, I think the media put him in a lot of pressure.
I think I would beg woodwork. I would beg woodwork to disagree with General Manzia.
And I think several people would beg to disagree with him.
Yeah. To be very fair to Joseph Olelenku, and I really felt for him when I saw him seated between General Karangi, is it, have I used the right time?
Yes.
Title? General Karangi and the Inspector General of Police. To me, I felt like this minister is feeling intimidated. When he's talking and saying those criminals, then Karangi tells him, no, terrorists. I looked at my minister for internal security, and surely the guy looked so intimidated, seated between Inspector General of Police and a general here. And I said, I can see there is no communication, because to General Karangi, who is in the army, he sees terrorists. Probably Inspector General of Police, he's seeing criminals. Because in the army, they don't deal with criminals. That's the work of the police. And I think, as a minister, I'm sorry to say, and to be very fair to him, this was big, and he has got this baptism of fire. Remember when he went to the issue of the airport, the fire at the airport, now again a terrorist attack. And I think, to be very fair to him, not only the media putting questions on him, and even the words, the choice of words. Remember him saying that there is an insignificant number of hostages inside there. And I said, how can the Minister for Internal Security call Kenyans who are hostages insignificant? Because even if it was one person, whether that person is a Kenyan or wherever they come from, is a human being and cannot be insignificant. So I think the issue here is not even the media putting pressure on him, but I think either inexperience or the way the operation was being carried out.
I want to come to Michael Myers. Yes,
if I may just give a small comment of the Honorable Secretary sitting between the General, Chief of Defense Force, and the Inspector General. You'll be surprised if I've been to Ulinzi House for many years. I still go there. The respect the military, the uniformed personnel have for the minister, you cannot believe, and it's a genuine respect because they know they are subordinate to civil authority. And they respect that, they take instructions from them, they make sure that whatever comes, they brief them accordingly.
You're saying two different things actually, because you're speaking about the respect accorded to the office of the cabinet secretary, whereas Waweru seems to be making the point about the individual occupying the office of the cabinet secretary.
And his capacity.
Yes. Michael Myers, I'll come to you because of course Waweru points out an interesting dilemma for a person who's supposed to be communicating with the country, but seems to be intimidated by the people surrounding him. What do you think should have happened? What would you have liked to see? Or how should it have been handled?
Well, I'm not going to get into how it should be handled. Let's await the results of the inquiry. But that inquiry has to be very thorough, it has to be very detailed, and then it has to be followed with fairly decisive action. Firing people is not in itself going to solve anything. Institutional reform is what's going to change things. Perhaps people should be fired. Perhaps ministers should lose their jobs. But the first thing is to identify institutional lapses and try to correct them, including intelligence gathering. The overarching point, it seems to me, is that the follow-through on this massacre, the follow-through on the conclusions of the Board of Inquiry will define Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency. More than that, it will define Kenya's standing in the eyes of the world. And that's of the essence. Kenya is at a tremendous transition point. Prosperity, dark clouds on the horizon. Let's not derail that
in a tough neighborhood
bright future.
too, huh?
In a very tough neighborhood. I think the world doesn't appreciate the role that Kenya is playing in Somalia. For 2 decades, perhaps even 3, that country has been in the grip of warlords. And Al-Shabaab is the worst of them. Now, the millions of people who live in Somalia have a hope for the future. They have a functioning government, they're receiving basic services for the first time in decades, and why is that? That's largely thanks to Kenyan forces and, of course,
The AMISOM
the
troops from
AMISOM
the
mission, which
African
includes
Union
Uganda
and
and other countries. Now, the president said very early on that this incident is not going to derail the country's determination to continue its mission. This is part of a broader phenomenon. If you look around Kenya, look at South Sudan, which is hardly standing as a nation. It's the world's newest nation, and yet can you really even give it that term? Sudan is in its 5th, 6th day of riots across the country. The Sahel, Mali is stable for now thanks to the French and UN intervention, but for how long?
And Algeria was attacked by Al-Qaeda earlier in the year.
Algeria was attacked by Al-Qaeda earlier in the year. Libya is a patchwork of warlordisms, and it has, yes, a national government with quotes around that, but it operates at the license of its warlords. The rise of warlordism around the world is a source of huge concern because it's essentially a retreat from governance, it's a retreat from civilization. That's what's at stake in Somalia, and that's why we had a massacre at Westgate Mall. It's part of a global picture.
So if we drill that down and come back to Kenya, and we have security chiefs who can't get on because they're protecting their turf, because we certainly heard that the NIS boss, Michael Gishangi, and the KDF boss, General Karangi, do not get on. And that was part of the problem we were seeing in the response to Westgate. It does seem as if we are losing sight of the context we're operating in.
I'm actually hearing this for the first time, to be honest.
Okay.
I know the Chief of Defense Force and the Director of NIS work together, and they're very, very close.
Because, of course, they both come from the Air Force, which you were in the Air Force as well.
Oh, these are, the Chief of Defense Force and the Director General were, but they're both from the Air Force. and they work very, very closely. They are very close. I don't know where it must be a perception which has been created that they don't work together. They may be having differences, but I had never heard about that.
David, you don't seem to agree with that.
Then I would like to dispel
Come on.
one perception that we may not have certain strategies. The military and the intelligence services have been training. They have been training together at the National Defense College at Karen. Senior military officers, most of those in the police, holding very key positions, are actually graduates, including some of the principal secretaries like Mutea Iringo is a graduate of National Defense College. And the National Defense College, when they sit there, towards the end of the course, because I've been a lecturer there, I've been directing staff in that college, they work on grand strategies on how to protect the country. And by the time they are deployed, whether in the ministries, because they are also civilians, they know exactly how to respond to any crisis. So the issue, which is being speculated, that we have no, the military has, the defense has no strategies, they actually have them in place, both at strategic level, operational level. They have plans, and unfortunately, they have very, very serious contingents which cannot be and will never be divulged to the public because of the nature of the, you don't want to tell everybody how you're going to be able to respond. And
Right.
Sure.
Some of it is tactical. We're winding up now, David.
Yeah. Well, I also think that I don't think there's a problem between the Director General of NIS and the Chief of Defense Forces, Karangi. I suspect there is none. Also, something to be said, I think this country is not short of qualified people, experts in all fields, security and so forth. For example, if you are looking for a good expert on terrorism, you would actually find Gishangi, the Director of Intelligence, would be the most well-placed, because before he became Director of Intelligence, National Intelligence Service, he was actually in charge of anti-terrorism in the Office of the President after he left the military. So he has a track record, and this thing squarely falls in his line. And if he didn't do his job, it would be amazing. It is whether, with the information that we have, people who are charged with action are doing the right things. And that's why I think the solution is not in crushing us with a lot of legislation and controls, but is in getting the people who are charged with security to do their job, not take bribes and sleep on the job. And somebody needs to crack the whip. I mean, on the road, Woodwork, you see a matatu which has got no lights past a roadblock. What we need to be doing is getting that police officer fired or to do the job. And you can employ counter surveillance tactics to get these people to work. In the military, there is the military police, which oversees the operations of the military officers. Why don't we have something like that for the police? Because all these are slip-ups, really. It's not lack of training.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to exonerate General Gishangi in a way that when he gets the information, it is clear that he disseminated the information like it has been reported. It is those, from what you've said, those who are supposed to action.
Right, who didn't. Actually, he said the same thing when we had the post-election violence in 2007. He said that the likelihood of violence breaking out after the elections was quite high. He was ignored, and he again says that with the Westgate attack that he disseminated the information and he was ignored. So yes, they will be investigated, but there have been questions about whether he himself is taken seriously.
And actually, Macaulay has talked about the military police and the way they oversee the military. In the intelligence, there's usually a cell of counterintelligence which ideally looks at what you are doing, and you don't just do what you want to do. You are held to account in everything you do.
Okay, we're winding up, but very quickly, Mr. Myers. Good morning, Cheche. Thanks for the discussion. As much as the whole siege was mishandled by the security agencies, the media kept the terrorists well informed on what was happening outside the mall, deployments, what was being done, tweets, so on, so that they could see, which tunnel was unmanned. And that came from Kyoko in Nairobi. A quick comment, please, because that was a huge area of contention between media organizations and the security. On the first day of the siege, media was asked not to broadcast live. What's your take on that?
This is always a situation in a crisis. Security forces always want to keep a cover on what's going on. Media, it's their job to cover the story. There's never going to be a resolution to that debate. My feeling is that accurate coverage of the news is absolutely indispensable to any democracy and people's right to know, and there can't be any compromising.
Okay, final thoughts, Oweru?
I think something that General Mwanzia said, I think we should commend KDF. They have done a good job in Somalia. Probably if they were not in Somalia, would have had worse things. They also did something good at Westgate. But you see, like civilians, we also demand that they do much more to save more lives and probably to save us from such things happening in the future. We also commend Kenyans for the way they responded. In general, we should congratulate ourselves. I think it was great. And we keep up the spirit for the sake of our nation.
Final thoughts, sir?
I quite agree with my colleague here. But I would like to say that as much as there will be a lesson learned and the interagency forces, security forces will come up with strategies on how to do, to be able to respond better. I would like to ask the media not to expect too much, because whatever they come up with is not everything which will be released to the public. They will have what can be consumed by the public will be released, but not to expect to go to the finer details, because the finer details will probably be would be compromising the security of the country and assisting the enemy against the country.
Final thoughts?
Well, I agree with General Mwanzia, except that in this particular case, I think the government communications or the authorities, whether it's the KDF or the police or the presidency, did not keep the information flow as was expected. There were lapses, and the conflicting information is just an example of bad crisis management. I do hope that this is a lesson they've learned and they'll better manage if ever another disaster occurs.
Okay. Michael.
Again, General, I've agreed with almost everything you say today, but not your last point. And I disagree very strongly. Again and again, in whatever country, Kenya or many others, United States included, you see debates, what should people have the right to know? And usually there's a line drawn, oh, it compromises security of the nation, implicitly invoking the patriotism theme. That is almost invariably used to cover up mistakes or outright wrongdoing. There is very, very, very little in the government realm that can't be made public and shouldn't be made public, because the credibility of a government is based on how open and direct it is with its people. And that is what is at stake at this Westgate massacre.
Okay, thank you. And that's all from us here at Cheche this week. Our thanks very much indeed to the retired Major General Charles Mwanzia. He's a former director of military intelligence as well as a lecturer at the Catholic University. We'd also like to thank Michael Mayer, the Dean of the New Graduate School of Media and Communications at the Aga Khan University. We've had a much longer program today because of the nature of the discussion following on from the Westgate terror siege. We'd also like to thank David Makali and Waweru Mboru, our panelists, for their insights. And I'll thank you all for watching and engaging. My name is Udwa Kamimo. I'll see you next week.